Sacred Heart Hospital's fluorescent corridors hum with the sterile efficiency of a Philadelphia winter morning, antiseptic sharp in the cold air that makes your throat tight after the third breath. Rachel Torres moves through the ICU with the practiced invisibility of temporary staff, her blue scrub slightly too large at the shoulders, her temp badge clipped beside a single dog tag on a broken chain that catches the light when she leans over patient charts. The dog tag swings like a pendulum, a keepsake she tells curious colleagues belonged to her late father, and the lie slides out smooth as medication through and fall line because the truth would require explanations she can't give. Her left hand trembles slightly when she reaches for 4 bags from the supply cart. Barely noticeable. A quarter-second hesitation. Most people miss it entirely. She straightens medical supplies with the precision of someone who once aligned surgical instruments under fluorescent lights in a combat hospital where the margins between life and death were measured in millimeters. Labels facing forward. Corners aligned. Saline bottles arranged by expiration date. Everything in its place because chaos kills and order saves. It's 6:13 a.m. when Nurse Jennifer stops at the medication cart and mentions the new patient in ICU for C in the tone people use when they're assigning work to staff they don't expect to stay long. Master Sergeant Daniel Carver. Blind Purple Heart recipient. Incoming transfer from the VA rehab facility in Coatesville, about 40 minutes outside the city. Admitted after a fall 3 days ago, some kind of delayed shrapnel complication from his service in Bagram. Jennifer shrugs like it's just another chart, just another patient, just another day in the endless cycle of bodies needing to be managed. Rachel's hand stills mid-reach toward the 4 cart. Bagram. The word lands in her chest like a percussion round, and for 3 full seconds her shoulders lock tight enough that the tremor spreads from her left hand through both arms and she has to grip the edge of the supply counter to steady herself. She forces air into her lungs. 1 breath. 2. 3. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead with the kind of white noise that usually feels neutral and now feels like pressure building behind her eyes. When she pulls up Master Sergeant Carver's chart on the iPad, the screen glows clinical and blue in the dimly lit hallway. Age 51. Service record spanning for combat tours. 2 Purple Hearts. Injuries consistent with IED exposure, shrapnel embedded near the left lung, vision lost in both eyes from chemical burn during a Phi-base attack in 2009. And there, in the emergency contact field, Miguel Torres. Relationship listed as son. Rachel's son. Miguel, who came home from his own deployment 6 months ago with a silver star pinned to his uniform and a look in his eyes like he'd seen something the rest of the world pretends doesn't exist. Miguel, who called her from his next deployment with a voice tight as wire and said his new commanding officer was the best tactical medic in Special Forces, that the CO had saved for Marines when a convoy got hit outside San Juan Valley, that this man had trained under some legend nobody was allowed to name. This man is walking through the doors of Sacred Heart in 48 minutes, and Rachel understands in the space of that single breath that her decision to vanish into temp positions and night shifts and anonymous scrubs was about to collide with the one part of her past she couldn't keep invisible. She closes the iPad. Clips it back to the cart. Her voice comes out steady when Jennifer asks if she's okay, just slightly tired, that's all, the late shift catching up with her, nothing that'll affect patient care. Jennifer nods and moves on because temp nurses are interchangeable and their problems don't matter, and that's exactly the invisibility Rachel has spent 2 years cultivating since she was medically discharged from Fort Bragg. The hospital corridors fill with morning traffic by 7:15 a.m. Attending physicians in their pressed coats. Surgical teams heading to OR prep. Residents moving with a controlled panic of people who know they're slightly behind schedule. The smell of burnt coffee and hand sanitizer mingles with the industrial antiseptic that coats everything at Sacred Heart like a second skin. Rachel moves between patient rooms in a rhythm she's perfected, check vitals, log them, adjust medications, document everything in triplicate because the system requires proof of every action, and she learned long ago that documentation is the only protection temporary staff ever gets. At 8:33 a.m., Dr. Marcus Ashford arrives on the ICU floor with 2 board members trailing behind him like remora fish, his white coat pressed sharp as a tactical blade, his voice pitched at the volume of someone accustomed to being heard whether he's speaking or not. He's reviewing quarterly metrics on his iPad, pointing out efficiency improvements needed in post-op recovery protocols, noting that Sacred Heart's average patient handoff time exceeds the regional standard by 6 minutes, an unacceptable deviation that he plans to correct within the month. He's been Chief of Surgical Services for 8 weeks, and in that time he's rebuilt 3-department workflows and sent 2 nurses to the complaint board for protocol inconsistencies. He is competent in the way that makes him dangerous. Not loud without reason. Not cruel for entertainment. He sees systems and he sees deviations from systems and he fixes deviations with the precision of someone who learned early that control is the only thing that separates the competent from the average. His board connections stretch from Philadelphia to Harrisburg. His family name opens doors that polite people pretend aren't reserved exclusively for surnames that own estates and country club memberships. He stops at the ICU nurses' station at 8:36 a.m. and glances through the window into ICU 4C, where Master Sergeant Daniel Carver sits propped on 3 pillows, his head turned toward the window though his eyes see nothing. Rachel is beside the bed, adjusting his pillow for the 3rd time though it hasn't moved in 12 minutes. She's reading to him from a printed article about adaptive technologies for blind veterans, her voice pitched low and even, not hurried, not condescending, the way you speak to someone whose dignity matters more than schedule efficiency. The reading ends at 9:04 a.m., which is 21 minutes past the end of Rachel's scheduled shift. Dr. Ashford's eyes narrow with the cold assessment of someone watching an employee exceed her authorization. He notes the extra time. The personal attention. The way Rachel's hand rests on the patient's shoulder for a moment before she leaves the room, not a clinical gesture, not protocol-compliant interaction. Something softer. Something that suggests she's forgotten her place in the hospital hierarchy and thinks she's here to heal people instead of process them. He makes a mental note. Not yet actionable. But noted. Rachel doesn't see him watching. She's already moved to the next station, clipping her empty medication cart into place, her temp badge catching the light one more time before she turns to head toward the break room where she'll punch out and leave before the day's shift arrives in force. The dog tag swings as she moves. The broken chain that holds it is the kind of thing nobody would ever think twice about, just another piece of damaged equipment, already discarded, already forgotten. She doesn't know that in 8 hours, this man will make the first of several decisions that will systematically dismantle her carefully constructed invisibility. What she does know is that Master Sergeant Daniel Carver asked her name before she left, and when she told him, Rachel, just Rachel, he'd gone very still for a moment and then asked if she'd ever served. The question hung between them like a held breath. She'd said no, moved on to other patients, maintained her composure, but his next words as she was leaving had struck something deep in her chest. You move like someone who knows exactly what she's doing in a crisis. That's not nursing school training. That's muscle memory from somewhere much harder. The elevator closes on her before she can respond. By the time it reaches the 1st floor, Rachel has already locked that moment away in the same place she keeps all her other truths, buried under 2 years of civilian clothes and temp badges and a practiced accent that smooths her military precision into something less threatening. But the clock on her shift says 9:04 a.m., and 38 minutes from now, the man who trained her son in tactical operations will wake up in ICU 4C and ask the first of many questions that will make her invisibility increasingly difficult to maintain. Dr. Ashford strides into ICU 4C at 14:37, his white coat pressed to surgical precision, his arrival announced by the sharp click of Italian leather on tile. Master Sergeant Carver sits propped at 45 degrees, his sightless eyes turned toward the window where afternoon light cuts through the blinds in parallel lines he cannot see. Rachel stands beside his bed, her voice steady as she reads from a worn copy of Black Hawk Down, her hand turning pages with the careful precision of someone who understands the weight of each word. Carver's daughter Sarah sits in the corner chair, mid-sentence about her children's soccer tournament, when Ashford's presence fills the doorway like pressure change before a storm. Ms. Torres. A word. Now. Here. His voice carries the particular timbre of a man accustomed to obedience, not a request, an extraction. Rachel closes the book with one smooth motion, her fingers marking the page. She stands. Her hands fold at her waist in the position of attention, except she wears scrubs, not dress blues, and her badge clips at the pocket like a scarlet letter. Ashford positions himself between her and the door, a deliberate blocking maneuver, a territorial claim. Sarah's conversation dies mid-syllable. Carver's head turns toward the sound, his jaw clenching as he recognizes the subtext before the words arrive. This is exactly the problem with temp staff, Ashford says, his volume ensuring Sarah hears every syllable, ensuring the nurses at the station outside hear it too. You don't understand professional boundaries. Master Sergeant Carver requires medical care, not a book club. Your shift ended 20 minutes ago. This is inappropriate fraternization with patients. Deviation from care schedules. It reflects poorly on Sacred Heart standards. The room crystallizes. Sarah's eyes widen. Carver's blind eye snapped toward Ashford's voice with the precision of a man who spent for years reading combat zones through sound and movement. His hands grip the bed rail hard enough that his knuckles pale. Rachel takes one measured breath. The fluorescent lights buzz their mechanical hymn above her head. She wipes away the single tear that escapes her right eye, not from her cheek, just one, precise as a tactical decision, without breaking eye contact with the wall behind Ashford's shoulder. Her voice, when it comes, is steady as a surgical laser. Respectfully, Doctor, compassion isn't a deviation. It's the standard you've forgotten. The silence that follows is the kind that happens in trauma bays when the monitors flatline and everyone realizes they've lost the fight. Ashford's jaw tightens. His hands curl at his sides. He has not heard the voice of someone who doesn't fear him. He has not encountered a temp nurse who responds to public humiliation with devastating calm instead of trembling apology. We'll discuss your insubordination tomorrow, he says, but the words land softer now, a man realizing he's struck something harder than he expected. He turns and walks out, his footsteps sharp against the tile like accusations. Carver reaches out blindly, finds Rachel's wrist, and whispers, "He doesn't know you." Does he? No, Rachel says. He doesn't. By the next afternoon, the temperature in the break room drops 15 degrees when Rachel unwraps her sandwich and sits at the table where four nurses have suddenly discovered urgent tasks elsewhere. Chairs scrape backward with the synchronization of a coordinated retreat. Jennifer mutters something loud enough to carry by the coffee station, Ashford's calling her the temp who forgot her place, and Rachel chews slowly, stares at the wall-mounted television showing muted news, her hands moving with the deliberate steadiness of someone who has eaten in worse conditions than this. The isolation is a tactic. She understands tactics. She's seen them deployed in desert camps and forward operating bases, and she knows how to sit very still and wait out the weather. 3 days of this. 3 days of chairs pushed back, conversations dying mid-word, accidental elbows that bump her in corridors, the kind of systematic social surgery that's supposed to break someone into smaller, more manageable pieces. Rachel moves through Sacred Heart's corridors with the same invisibility she's cultivated for 2 years, except now it's not safety. Now it's punishment. The third humiliation is public and calculated. She arrives for her shift on the 4th day to find her employee write-up posted on the unit assignment board where every staff member passes multiple times daily, the official board where schedules are pinned and codes are called and the hospital's machinery of discipline becomes visible to all. Dr. Ashford's notation is written in red ink at the bottom, insubordination and failure to maintain professional boundaries. Counseling required before next patient assignment. 2 residents read it and exchange glances that slide toward Rachel like knives through water. A nurse she's worked beside for 3 months suddenly becomes very focused on her clipboard. Rachel stands before the board for exactly 5 seconds, reading every word, her eyes moving with the methodical precision of someone cataloging an enemy position. She reaches up, removes the paper from its thumbtack, folds it once with crisp precision, the fold of someone who's folded maps in darkness, who's folded tents in rain, who's folded the uniforms of soldiers who won't need them anymore, and places it in her scrub pocket. Then she walks to the supply closet where no one can see her face. The door closes. The fluorescent light hums its mechanical song. She stands among the boxes of nitrile gloves and alcohol swabs and stares at the inventory list taped to the shelf and doesn't let her hands shake, won't let her hands shake because shaking is a luxury she surrendered a very long time ago. 3 days into the cold shoulder treatment, on a night shift when Sacred Heart runs lean and mean on skeleton crews, Rachel works the graveyard rotation. Ashford has strategically altered the schedule. She noticed her name moved to nights the moment the roster updated, her patient load reduced to post-surgical recoveries that require minimal interaction, the kind of work that keeps her isolated in rooms instead of integrated with the team. The message is clear: you are being erased. You are being pushed toward the exit. At 02 for 7 hours, the emergency room admits 6 critical patients from a multi-vehicle collision on I-95, and the code team scrambles downstairs like water circling a drain. Rachel checks on her assigned patients in the post-op wing. Wound dressings, for flows, vital stable, are moving with the economical efficiency that gets the work done without attracting attention. She saves ICU for C for last. Master Sergeant Carver has been stable since admission, his blind eyes tracking movement by sound, his body healing in increments that doctors measure and nurses monitor. She enters his room to find him gasping. His lips have taken on a cyanotic tinge, that particular blue-purple of insufficient oxygen, the color of underwater drowning happening in slow motion. His hands clutch at his chest. His breathing sounds like wind through canyon passages, rapid and high-pitched and wrong in every way that matters. His neck veins are distending, visible against the taut muscles, and his skin has taken on the waxy pallor she's seen in battlefield trauma, in the moments after blast injuries when the body begins its shutdown sequence. Carver, Rachel says, her voice dropping into the register of command. I'm here. Tell me what you feel. Can't breathe, he rasps. Pressure. Right side. Like, he stops, unable to articulate what his body is screaming. But she knows. The constellation of symptoms assembles itself in her mind with the precision of a combat medic reading a trauma pattern: tension pneumothorax. A collapsed lung. Trapped air compressing his heart, suffocating him from the inside. She hits the code button. Nothing. The crash team is in the ER, tangled in a multi-vehicle chaos, minutes away that feel like hours. She hits it again. Still nothing. The monitors scream their alarm, a sound like electronic panic, like the entire hospital suddenly aware that someone is dying. Rachel moves. Her daughter Sarah left hours ago. The room is empty except for the two of them and the machinery of medical failure. On the visitor table sits an MRE package. A veteran visitor left it during afternoon rounds, a gift Carver accepted and set aside. Rachel crosses to it in 2 strides and tears open the packaging with the focused violence of someone who has worked without instruments before. She returns to Carver's bedside. Her hands move with muscle memory she spent 2 years trying to forget. She places her free hand against his ribs, counting spaces with tactical precision: first rib, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, her fingers reading his anatomy like a map to survival. With her other hand, she fashions the MRE packaging into a makeshift chest seal, the plastic and cardboard designed to create a one-way valve, to trap nothing inside, to let pressure escape. There's no needle. There should be a needle. There should be a 14-gauge angiocath at minimum, the kind of tool that transforms pneumothorax from death sentence into salvageable emergency. Instead, there's her hands and improvisation and the tactical knowledge that some rules exist to be bent when bending them means someone breathes another minute. She positions the seal. She presses down with the heel of her palm against his chest wall, and she feels the resistance before she feels the release, that moment of resistance before the air hisses free, a sound like breath escaping, like pressure finally finding its exit. The needle wouldn't exist anyway, so her fingertips locate the space between ribs with the precision of a surgeon's probe, and air hisses out in a long, relieving stream. Carver's breathing eases. His color begins its return from blue-purple toward human pink. The heart monitor's frantic beeping slows from the chaotic 160s down through the 120s, down toward something approaching normal rhythm, sinus rhythm, stable, the kind of heartbeat that means he lives another day. "Stay with me," Rachel says, and her hand holds the seal in place while her other hand rests on his shoulder, her fingers steady as bedrock. "The team is coming. Stay with me." His hand finds hers in the darkness of his blindness, and he grips it like an anchor. His hand finds hers in the darkness of his blindness, and he grips it like an anchor. Rachel's fingers steady against his palm, reading his pulse through touch the way she learned in field medicine courses that technically never happened. The monitors around them hum their mechanical lullaby, oxygen saturation holding at 88%, heart rate climbing toward normal, the ventilators whoosh and release like breath itself returning to a drowning man. She doesn't move. Not yet. Not while he needs her here. The ICU floor at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday is a cathedral of fluorescent hum and barely-staffed silence. 3 nurses for 12 beds. 1 attending physician somewhere in the building, possibly asleep. Rachel had worked enough military field hospitals to recognize a skeleton crew when she saw one. This was triage logistics, bodies minimum, and the hospital administration knew it. Dr. Ashford had made sure of that. He'd altered her schedule 2 weeks ago, systematically removing her from the night shifts, then restricted her ICU access with a single keystroke through the hospital's credentialing system. She only had access to this floor because Carver had specifically requested her, and even that request had been noted in his file with a red flag and an annotation in Ashford's handwriting, patient-staff boundary concern. What Ashford hadn't anticipated was that Rachel would choose to work the night shift anyway, swapping shifts with another nurse, trading away hazard pay just to be on the floor where her son's commanding officer lay blind and broken in a hospital bed. What he hadn't foreseen was that sometimes the people you're trying to erase simply choose to be present anyway. The clock on the wall reads 2:13 a.m. when Master Sergeant Carver's breathing changes. It's subtle. Most nurses would miss it. The ventilator's rhythm stays steady, the alarm thresholds haven't triggered, the oxygen saturation numbers drift lazily across the monitor like they're on vacation. But Rachel hears it first, a change in the quality of his chest wall movement, a slight asymmetry in the rise and fall, the sound of air moving differently through his left lung than his right. She's moved from his bedside to check before line when she feels it, that clinical whisper in the back of her skull that separates dead nurses from living ones. Something is wrong. She presses her palm against his chest. There's pressure there, resistance where there shouldn't be, the kind of firmness that speaks to internal architecture collapsing. The shrapnel from Bagram never fully came out, fragments too close to his descending aorta to risk removal, and sometimes those fragments have conversations with a man's lungs about geography and proximity and the physics of breathing under pressure. "I'm right here," she says quietly, and then she moves. The monitors begin their complaint 2 seconds after she sees the saturation drop. 88. 84. The heart rate climbs in that panicked arithmetic of a body that knows it's suffocating. 81% oxygen. 79. The ventilator is pushing air, but the air isn't going anywhere, trapped in space where it shouldn't be, pressure building against his left lung like a fist closing inside his chest. Rachel reaches for her radio to call the code team and then remembers, the ER is a war zone tonight, multi-vehicle accident on IR-95, all hands on the trauma bay. The code team's ETA scrolls through the information she'd caught at the nursing station 15 minutes ago, code blue, trauma bay 4, estimated 8 to 10 minutes before anyone can respond to an ICU call. 8 to 10 minutes. The oxygen saturation is at 67%. A man can lose consciousness in 4. He can arrest in 6. She doesn't think. She moves like muscle memory has its own wisdom, like 2 years of trying to be someone she isn't just evaporates in the face of a drowning man. The needle decompression kit is in the crash cart, but she needs it here, now, her hands already moving toward the bedside table where a visiting veteran had left his MRE package for days ago, something Rachel had almost thrown away but something in her, some old instinct, had made her keep. Meals ready to eat come with thick plastic packaging designed to survive drops from helicopters. They're waterproof. They're airtight. They're not standard medical equipment, but then again, Bagram didn't have standard medical equipment either. 71%. 70%. The numbers are falling like stones down a well. She finds the 14-gauge needle in her own pocket. She keeps one always, taped to the inside of her scrubs where nobody sees it, where nobody asks questions about why a temporary floor nurse carries trauma equipment. the second intercostal space, midclavicular line. She's done this before in the dark, in the rain, with her hand shaking from adrenaline and hypothermia and the knowledge that if she miscounts ribs, a man dies anyway, just slower. She's done this 4 times. 3 of those men walked out of the hospital. The needle slides in with a sound like a whisper ending. Air rushes out, the hiss of pressure releasing, that specific vocalization of pneumothorax deflating, the kind of sound that lives in the space between medicine and prayer. 68%. The needle stays taped to his chest. The improvised seal from the MRE package goes over the needle site, creating the barrier, plastic from a ration intended for soldiers becoming the thing that saves a soldier's life. The irony settles somewhere in her peripheral awareness, noted and filed away for the 3 a.m. moment she doesn't allow herself to have. 65%. 70. 74. The oxygen saturation climbs like something being hauled up from the bottom of the ocean, hand over hand, breath by breath. She's holding the seal in place, her other hand on his shoulder, her voice steady in the darkness where his blindness already lives. You're okay. I've got you. Breathing returning. We're bringing you back. The ventilator's rhythm synchronizes with his natural breathing, finding harmony instead of fighting resistance. 82%. 85. The heart rate begins its descent from panic into something resembling stability, 120, 114, moving toward something a human body can sustain. The monitors settle into the kind of rhythm that means a man is living instead of dying. That's when the code team arrives. Dr. Patel leads them in with the physicality of someone who's been running, the attending physician from the ER finally freed from the multi-vehicle chaos outside, his face already composed into the clinical mask that means he's about to assess and intervene. He sees Carver first, color returning, chest moving with purpose, monitors singing something close to normal. He sees Rachel next, still at the bedside, one hand maintaining the seal, the other steady as surgical steel. What happened here? Patel moves to the monitors, reads the current oxygen saturation climbing toward 92%, then looks at Rachel with something crossing his face, recognition maybe, or the sudden recalibration of who he thought she was. Tension pneumothorax, Rachel says, her voice a neutral instrument. Delayed reaction to shrapnel migration. The ER code was delayed. He was saturating at 67%. Dr. Patel examines the improvised seal. His hand moves to the needle site with the gentleness of someone reading Braille, understanding what he's looking at through the simple language of emergency medicine. You did a needle decompression with an MRE package. His voice carries something like wonder. That was a 9-minute conversation with cardiac arrest and he stops. He's looking at her differently now, the way people look when they see something they weren't prepared to comprehend. You just saved his life. The door opens. Dr. Marcus Ashford enters. He's in dark slacks and a pressed shirt, the kind of casual off-duty attire that speaks to being called away from something important, probably his phone at his bedside, the hospital administrator woken at nearly 3 in the morning to respond to a code. His eyes move across the scene with the precision of someone who's learned to catalogue deviations from protocol the way other people catalogue birds. He sees the monitor numbers. He sees Carver breathing. He sees the improvised seal. He sees Rachel. What procedure did you perform, Ms. Torres? His voice carries the temperature of deep space. Not a question. An indictment. Rachel meets his eyes. The code team has gone quiet. She can feel the weight of their attention like a spotlight, the sudden understanding that something beyond medical emergency is happening here. She doesn't drop her gaze. She doesn't apologize. When she speaks, her voice has dropped an octave from the deferential whisper it was 2 weeks ago, when she was still trying to fit herself into the shape of someone smaller. Emergency decompression. The code team was delayed. He was dying. For sentences. No please. No sir. No apology for staying alive. Ashford picks up the MRE package with his thumb and forefinger, examining it like biohazard material. You performed a procedure outside your scope of practice. You're a temporary nurse, not a trauma surgeon. His eyes lock onto hers. This is grounds for immediate termination. Dr. Patel starts to speak, his voice carrying protest, but Ashford's glare moves toward him and the attending physician stops mid-sentence. The hierarchy is understood without words. Dr. Marcus Ashford holds the position that matters. The credentials. The board connections. The power to decide whose voice carries weight and whose gets filed away in a personnel folder with red flags and annotations. Contact HR, Ashford says to no one in particular. Security should escort Ms. Torres from the premises. We'll process the termination paperwork in the morning. Rachel's hand remains on the improvised seal. She doesn't move. Carver's oxygen saturation reads 93%. His heart rate is 92. She counts the seconds, 1, 2, 3, until she's certain his breathing is stable enough to release, then slowly, with the precision of someone setting down something sacred, she steps away from the bedside. The code team disperses. The ICU floor returns to its humming silence. Ashford watches her leave the room, his face composed, satisfied with the geometry of control restored. What happens in the 12 hours after is mathematics. Ashford reassigns all her patients to other nursing staff with a single note in the hospital system: terminate all assignments, temp staff removed pending investigation. He alters the master schedule to eliminate her upcoming shifts, then takes his phone into his office and makes 4 consecutive calls to board members and hospital administration, each one a measured explanation of liability concerns, each one a careful distancing of Sacred Heart from the actions of an unqualified employee acting outside her authority. He prepares an incident report that mentions the procedure 3 times and mentions that the patient survived not once. He frames the narrative so completely around protocol violation that the outcome becomes irrelevant: a dangerous employee has been contained, the institution's credibility protected, order restored. When Rachel arrives at 7 in the morning for what she believes is her next shift, security stops her at the ICU entrance before she can even swipe her badge. The termination papers are already printed, her employee ID already deactivated, the separation already logged into the system as immediate removal from position due to gross overreach of scope of practice and violation of hospital protocol section 4.7.2. She reads the paperwork in the security office with hands that don't shake. She signs it with a pen that feels heavier than it should. She returns her badge and her access card and the blue surgical mask she keeps in her pocket for shifts. Then she walks to the basement. The hospital laundry facility operates on a 24-hour cycle, the industrial washers humming their rhythmic drone, the steam rising from the pressing equipment in shapes that look like ghosts having conversations with the fluorescent lights. Rachel folds her borrowed scrubs with the same precision she once used to fold her uniform, the muscle memory of military discipline making the task deliberate and exact, quarters folded into eighths, then sixteenths, then stacked in a perfect rectangle that would pass inspection by someone trained to notice perfection. She places them in the donated clothing bin. She removes the single dog tag from beneath her scrubs where it's lived for 2 years, the one thing she's carried that connects her to who she was before she became someone else. The metal is cool against her palm. She doesn't look at the name engraved on it. She just holds it for a moment, 3 seconds, 4, 5, and then she hooks the chain back around her neck and tucks the tag beneath a fresh shirt that doesn't belong to Sacred Heart, doesn't belong to anyone who thinks she's just a temp nurse, just a person whose value can be disposed of in the same bin with contaminated linens. The laundry room door closes behind her with a soft hydraulic whisper. Outside the hospital, Philadelphia is beginning its morning, cars on Broad Street, the smell of diesel exhaust mixing with rain that started falling sometime between the hours when decent people sleep, the city wet and indifferent to whether or not Master Sergeant Daniel Carver drew another breath yesterday at 2:06 a.m. Rachel walks through the rain without an umbrella, letting it fall on her shoulders like the weight of every choice that brought her here, to this parking lot, with her employment terminated and her secret still intact and her son's commanding officer still breathing because she couldn't leave him drowning. She didn't flinch when Ashford said the words. She didn't tremble or cry or retreat into a supply closet to have a private breakdown. She'd simply stepped away from the bedside, let the institutional machinery grind forward, and walked herself out of the hospital like someone who'd already survived worse things than losing a job nobody thought she needed anyway. But that wasn't the worst part. That wasn't the moment everything changed forever. That moment was still coming, waiting on the other side of a file that someone would open in an office building on Independence Hall, a classified folder that would carry her real name, her real service record, the invisible weight of a major hiding behind the voice of a temporary nurse. The rain fell harder. Rachel kept walking. And somewhere in the city, the gears were already turning, the institutional machinery of the United States military beginning to notice that one of its own had just been erased by a man who had no idea who he was erasing. The MRE package was tan and crinkled, abandoned on the bedside table by a veteran visitor who'd left it 3 days ago. Rachel's fingers knew what to do before her conscious mind caught up. Tension pneumothorax, the lung collapsing inward, Carver's oxygen saturation plummeting from 92 to 78 to 64 as his body fought for air. The code team was 7 minutes out, delayed by the multi-vehicle accident clogging the ER. 7 minutes was forever. She tore open the MRE package with precision. Not hesitation. Not panic. The muscle memory that lived in her hands, muscle memory she'd spent 2 years trying to bury in civilian scrubs and quiet efficiency, took over completely. Her fingers moved as if her conscious mind had stepped aside and let the major through. The needle went in at the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. The hiss of air escaping sounded like a sigh of relief. Carver's body sagged backward, the rigid tension draining from his shoulders. Oxygen saturation climbing, 68, 72, 80. His breathing deepened, became something less like drowning. She sealed the site with the MRE package foil, taping it down with medical precision. A pressure dressing that would hold until proper equipment arrived. Blood pressure stabilizing. Heart rate dropping from 148 to 118. Sinus rhythm. The numbers told the story of a man returning to the land of the living because hands that had held soldiers together in Bagram knew exactly what to do in a Philadelphia hospital room. The footsteps came 7 minutes and 43 seconds later. Dr. Marcus Ashford pushed through the doorway trailing the code team like royalty trailing servants. His white coat was pristine. His hair was in place. He'd been called from home and had still managed to look untouched by urgency. His eye scanned Carver first, oxygen saturation 94% now, breathing steady, no signs of distress. The doctor's expression shifted with the calculation of a man realizing his arrival was redundant. Then his gaze fell on Rachel. She was still at Carver's bedside, one hand on the rails, the other having just finished securing the final piece of tape. The MRE package foil was visible beneath the bandaging. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. Her face was the blank slate of someone who'd learned to make herself disappear years ago, back when disappearing meant survival. Dr. Ashford's jaw tightened. Who performed the needle decompression? The silence in the room became a physical thing. The code team members exchanged glances. One of them, a respiratory therapist named Chen, spoke carefully. The patient was decompensating. Tension pneumothorax. By the time we cleared the ER traffic, I asked who. Dr. Ashford's voice carried the kind of calm that made flesh prickle. He stepped closer to Carver, examining the improvised seal, understanding immediately what had been done and knowing with absolute certainty that Rachel Torres had done it. Patient is stable, she said quietly. 2 words. Not a request for validation, not an explanation. A statement of fact. Dr. Ashford turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was something beyond anger. It was the look of a man watching his carefully constructed hierarchy crumble. This temp nurse, this invisible woman he'd spent a week ensuring everyone understood was operating beyond her scope, had just performed emergency medicine with a precision that suggested training no temporary staffing agency could provide. But more than that, she'd made him unnecessary. He'd arrived prepared to manage a code and found instead a room full of people who'd already survived it. You're restricted from ICU access effective immediately, he said, his voice dropping to the tone of someone pronouncing sentence. I'm calling Dr. Reeves. Reassigning your remaining patients for the shift. He turned to the code team. Notify me of any complications, no matter how minor. I'll be reviewing the chart personally. His eyes came back to Rachel with the weight of a judge's gavel. We'll discuss your scope of practice in writing. By dawn, the phone calls had been made. Board members and hospital administrators, people whose names Rachel would never know but whose collective voice carried the authority of institutional power. By morning, her patient assignments had been shuffled. By 10 a.m., her ICU access was revoked. The system had shifted to accommodate Dr. Ashford's narrative before anyone could ask inconvenient questions about who'd actually kept Master Sergeant Carver breathing. She tried to check on him at 11:30. Security stopped her at the unit door. Not roughly. Not with malice. Just with the inexorable force of protocol. The young officer, maybe 24, maybe Marine Reserve based on his bearing, held an envelope. I'm sorry. You've been terminated. Effective immediately. The termination papers were already drafted. Signature lines already filled. The language was clinical and crushing, gross overreach of scope of practice. Performance of procedures outside authorized licensure. Insubordination and failure to maintain professional boundaries. There was no mention of the patient's climbing oxygen saturation. No mention of the needle that had released the pressure collapsing his lung. No mention of survival. Rachel looked at the papers for 3 seconds, then at the young officer's face, his discomfort, his reluctance, his obvious awareness that something fundamentally wrong was occurring. She didn't make him feel worse by arguing. Thank you for your professionalism, she said quietly, and took the envelope. She walked to the basement without stopping. 73 steps down. The laundry facility hummed with industrial purpose, industrial washers cycling through loads, industrial dryers tumbling scrubs through 140-degree heat, the smell of bleach thick enough to taste. A board attendant in a faded polo shirt sat behind the return counter, barely looking up from his phone when Rachel approached. She placed her scrubs on the counter. 2 years of invisible service, folded into a neat pile. Blue fabric that had held her safe, let her be just a nurse, just a shadow moving through hospital corridors with a plastic badge and a borrowed identity. Her hands moved with the precision she'd learned in a different life. Crease the sleeves at the shoulder seams. Align the collar. Fold along the center line. Square the corners. The motions were mathematical, exact, the way she'd folded her Class A dress uniform before every formation for 12 years. The way she'd packed her gear before every deployment. The way soldiers learn to make order from chaos, to impose structure on the unstructurable thing called goodbye. The dog tag swung forward as she bent, silver catching the fluorescent light, the chain still broken from when shrapnel had torn through the pocket of her body armor in Bagram. The attendant stamped her receipt without looking at her face. Without knowing he was processing the discharge of a major from the United States Army Special Forces. Without understanding that the woman folding those scrubs had carried wounded soldiers across 400 meters of open ground while mortars fell, had taught Special Forces medics how to stop hemorrhage in the field, had developed treatment protocols for combat trauma that were now standard teaching across every military medical training facility in the country. Rachel took the stairs instead of the elevator. The basement exit led to the parking garage where her 12-year-old Honda Civic waited like a loyal dog, patient and unfussy and utterly incapable of understanding that its owner had just been erased by a system designed specifically to erase people who threatened it. She sat in the driver's seat for 4 minutes with her hands on the steering wheel, breathing measured and even, the kind of breathing they taught you to do when you were waiting for a helicopter extraction under fire. When you were deciding whether to move or hold. Whether to fight or disappear. Then she drove home to her apartment in northeast Philadelphia where Miguel's academy graduation photo sat on a shelf next to books about civilian nursing and a locked case containing medals she'd learned not to look at. That evening, Carver asked the night nurse where Rachel was. The nurse was new, uncertain, from an agency temporary staffing pool. She said she didn't know. But Carver, blind since an IED explosion in Nangarhar province had taken his vision, had heard everything. He'd heard the commotion. Heard Dr. Ashford's voice cutting through the room. Heard security arriving. Heard the quiet finality of a woman folding her professional life into its component pieces and walking away from it. Through his morphine haze, Carver had learned that some sounds told you more than eyes ever could. He asked for his phone. It took him 3 tries to dial the number, fingers fumbling with touch screen buttons, but the voice on the other end answered on the second ring. Carver? Miguel Torres was deployed overseas, somewhere the government kept classified, but brothers answered other brothers' calls at any hour from any distance. You good? Your mother, Carver said carefully, each word chosen with military precision, just saved my life and got fired for it. And son, there's something about the way she moved. Something about her hands. The kind of thing you don't learn from temporary nurse training. The silence stretched across 8 seconds of stateside distance and overseas deployment. Tell me about your mom's service record, Carver continued. Miguel didn't answer immediately. Then, she's a major. The silence that followed wasn't confused. It was the silence of a man whose entire understanding of the woman who'd raised him was suddenly recalibrating, everything clicking into place with terrible clarity, the scars she never explained, the way her hands moved sometimes like she was conducting invisible operations, the odd moments when she'd stare at something no one else could see. Medical Operations Commander, Miguel continued quietly. 3 tours. Silver Star. 2 Bronze Stars with Valor. She was decorated but medically discharged in 2021 after the field hospital collapse at Phi Base, Dakota. She carried 3 wounded soldiers out of a building that was coming down around her. That's why her left arm, he stopped. Jesus Christ. She got fired for saving your life? For doing exactly what she was trained to do. In his hospital bed in Philadelphia, Carver smiled despite the morphine, despite the blindness. Then we've got a problem, son. And somewhere in the city, somewhere in the institutional machinery of the United States military, something had begun to move. Notifications were triggering in classified databases. Security clearances were pinging red flags in government servers. The routine background check initiated by Sacred Heart separation protocols was about to intersect with a Department of Defense database that had been quietly tracking one Major Rachel Torres for 3 years, waiting for exactly this kind of moment. The person who fired her had no idea what they just set in motion. 72 hours. That's how long it takes Sacred Heart's automated background check system to flag a separated employee's classified security clearance and route it upstream to the federal liaison. The file moves silently through encrypted channels, a routine protocol that nobody notices until it lands on Sandra Morrison's desk with the weight of a surgical steel tray dropped from 4 stories. She opens it with trembling hands. The letterhead says Department of Defense. The name says Rachel Torres. And beneath that, the credentials stack like artillery rounds lined up for inspection, Major, United States Army Special Forces. Silver Star recipient. 2 Bronze Stars. Combat Action Badge. Purple Heart. Meritorious Service Medal. The room tilts. Sandra's phone call to the Philadelphia Veterans Affairs Office takes 30 seconds. Her voice breaks on the 3rd word. By noon that same Friday, Miguel Torres is standing in the marble lobby of Sacred Heart Hospital wearing his Special Forces dress uniform, the one reserved for formal ceremonies, promotions, and funerals. His black beret sits at regulation angle. His chest carries the weight of medals that most Americans will never understand. He moves toward the 3rd floor surgical unit with the kind of purposeful stride that makes security personnel step aside without being asked. The nurse's station goes quiet when he approaches. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't need to. His rank is written in his bearing the way other men's rank is written in their speech. Where is Major Torres? His voice is not a request. It's a command. The floor nurse, Jennifer, whose name tag says Jennifer but whose hands are shaking now, looks up from the computer screen. Her mouth opens. Nothing comes out. The second nurse, Marcus, who was eating a protein bar and checking discharge summaries, sets down his food. He stands. His chair rolls backward and hits the wall with a soft thud. He opens the file that's been sitting on the nurse's station since mid-morning, the one that nobody knew what to do with. His voice breaks on the first sentence. Rachel Torres. Major. United States Army Special Forces. He reads it like he's pronouncing someone deceased. Silver Star recipient. 2 Bronze Stars. Each line is its own paragraph of shock. Each line explains something about the woman who folded scrubs in the basement and ate lunch alone and saved a blind veteran's life with her hands moving on their own. That's when Commander James Hawthorne of SEAL Team 3, who'd been visiting wounded team members 3 floors down, who'd heard the radio chatter about a uniformed soldier in the building, who understood immediately what that meant, walks up to the nurse's station. He reads over Marcus's shoulder. His hands go very still. His jaw works once. Twice. Then he speaks with the voice of a man who has seen the worst that war has to offer and has learned to measure his words accordingly. Combat Action Badge. Purple Heart. Meritorious Service Medal. Jesus, she ran tactical medical operations in Bagram for 4 years. He says it like he's reading a memorial. Like the woman he's describing is already a ghost. She managed trauma teams. Coordinated with Command for Civilian Casualty Protocols. Probably trained half the medics in 3 provinces. The silence in the nurse's station is the kind of quiet that comes right before an explosion. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes. The fluorescent lights hum their mechanical hymn above their heads. And then the elevator chimes. The FBI agent who steps out that afternoon isn't there to interrogate anyone. Special Agent Chen, who has Rachel's file open on his tablet, who has been trying to reach her for 3 days, who now stands in the center of Sacred Heart's 3rd-floor corridor with the kind of calm authority that makes even doctors listen, announces his purpose with surgical precision. I need to speak with Major Torres. She's been requested to consult on a classified matter. He looks at the assembled staff, Miguel Torres still in dress uniform, Commander Hawthorne with his shoulders back, the 2 nurses who've been reading credentials out loud like a liturgy. Major Torres holds security clearance that most of you couldn't dream of accessing. If anyone knows where she is, you tell me now. The room doesn't just go quiet. The room stops existing in the normal way. Miguel's hand moves to his phone. His finger hovers over Rachel's contact. He doesn't call yet. Not yet. Dr. Marcus Ashford emerges from the stairwell at that exact moment, right foot forward, already composing the explanation he'll need to give about why there are federal agents and special forces officers gathering like storm clouds on his floor. His mouth opens. He doesn't get a word out. Commander Hawthorne turns to face him. The movement is slow. Deliberate. Like a predator rotating its head toward prey. Like the air pressure in the corridor just changed. Like the world got several degrees colder. Hawthorne's eyes move across Ashford's face with the kind of appraisal used to assess damage to equipment or bodies after explosions. You're the one who fired her. It's not a question. Hawthorne's voice comes out the color of gunmetal. The one who called her insubordinate. The one who never mentioned she saved a patient's life. Ashford's face goes pale the way faces go pale when blood pressure drops. His mouth opens again. Still nothing. He turns and walks back toward his office. His pace isn't quite running. It's not quite walking either. It's something in between, the locomotion of a man whose entire reality is collapsing in real time. What Ashford does next, he does alone in his office with the door locked and his hands moving across the keyboard like he's trying to outrun something. He opens the hospital security system. His credentials still work, for now, anyway, and he navigates to the night of Carver's respiratory crisis. He finds the footage from the patient room. He locates the file timestamp. He begins the deletion process, his fingers moving with increasing desperation, trying to erase the evidence of what that temporary nurse actually accomplished. His logic is simple: no footage, no proof of the unauthorized procedure. Just an insubordinate employee who exceeded her scope. Just a termination justified by protocol and hierarchy. What Dr. Marcus Ashford doesn't know is that Tommy Chen, the hospital's IT specialist, Army veteran, 101st Airborne, 3 years as a signals officer before he learned to build systems instead of fight wars, has been watching him for exactly 47 minutes. Tommy was in the break room when Marcus read Rachel's file aloud. Tommy understood immediately what that meant. Tommy recognized the voice of a fellow service member being described in credentials instead of names. And Tommy, who has spent his career securing networks against exactly this kind of sabotage, has embedded monitoring software in Ashford's system access logs. When the deletion process starts, Tommy's screen lights up like a Christmas tree. Every keystroke captured. Every file access logged. Every deletion attempt timestamp documented and mirrored to a secure external server that exists in 3 different geographic locations. By the time Ashford finishes, Tommy has already compiled a comprehensive evidence package, the security footage showing the respiratory crisis in real time, Rachel's hands moving with precision, the improvised chest seal from the MRE package, the O2 saturation climbing from 62 to 87 to 92. The timestamps. The call logs showing Ashford's methodical campaign of restriction and reassignment. The email chains where he documented her insubordination. The voicemails from his calls to board members requesting her termination. All of it. All of it. Tommy packages it together and sends it to Sandra Morrison in the VA liaison office, to Commander Hawthorne, to Special Agent Chen, to Board Chair Gregory Walsh. The subject line reads, Urgent, evidence of evidence tampering and ethics violations, Dr. Marcus Ashford. Security Chief Martinez, Marine Corps veteran, 2 Iraq tours, the kind of man who can read a room's threat level the way other people read weather forecasts, is waiting by Ashford's office door when he emerges. Martinez's hand rests on his belt. His expression is the color of concrete. Dr. Ashford. I need your hospital credentials and office keys. Effective immediately, you're on administrative leave pending investigation. It's not a request. It's a command. It's delivered the way commands are delivered in war zones, clear, final, with no room for negotiation. Ashford's calls to his attorney that evening go somewhat better than his previous phone calls. Somewhat. The attorney reviews the evidence package in real time over a secure video conference, the footage, the deletion logs, the ethics violations, the destruction of evidence charge waiting like an open grave. The attorney's assessment is delivered with the kind of clinical precision reserved for terminal diagnoses. They have you on video attempting to delete security footage. That's obstruction of evidence under Pennsylvania Criminal Code 4501. The ethics violations alone will cost you your license. If they push obstruction charges, we're talking potential criminal prosecution. The next week is a slow-motion collapse. Ashford's resignation request arrives before the board formally demands it. His applications to 3 different hospital systems are withdrawn. His wife, who built her entire social identity on his position, serves him with separation papers. His calls to former allies go unanswered. Board members whose voicemails promise support suddenly have scheduling conflicts. The supplemental insurance company offers him a position, folding table, parking lot near a strip mall, commission-based compensation. He accepts because the alternative is answering questions he doesn't have answers for. 6 months later, Sacred Heart Hospital's administrative wing has new energy. The 3rd floor corridor feels different. The emergency protocols have been rewritten. The Veteran Services Department, which didn't exist before, now occupies a full suite of offices overlooking the city. And in the corner office with the best view of Philadelphia's skyline, Rachel Torres sits at a desk that has her name on a brass placard, Major, R.E.T., Rachel Torres, Director of Veteran Services. Her left hand trembles slightly as she signs off on new hire paperwork, 3 additional veteran nurses, all with combat backgrounds, all starting next month. She doesn't hide the tremor anymore. Not here. Not in this office where her dog tags hang in a shadow box beside a photograph of Master Sergeant Carver at Miguel's promotion ceremony, both men in dress uniform, both smiling, Carver's vision partially restored after surgery, good enough to recognize the face of the man who raised him. Master Sergeant Carver sits in her office now, visiting hours, civilian clothes, the kind of peace in his expression that comes from understanding that the person who saved your life wasn't just a nurse. He was your son's commanding officer. He was a major. She was impossible. She was real. Rachel shows him the new protocols they're implementing across the Veteran Services Network. The trauma-informed care training. The hiring initiatives targeting medically discharged personnel. The peer support groups that start next month. Miguel told me you didn't want him to know, Carver says quietly. Rachel nods once. I wanted to leave that life behind. Thought if I was quiet enough, small enough, it wouldn't matter. But you can't bury who you are forever. Across the city, at a folding table in a strip mall parking lot between a nail salon and a tax preparation service, Dr. Marcus Ashford sits in a polo shirt bearing an insurance company logo. 3 people have approached his table all morning. 2 were lost. One was genuinely interested and then walked away when she realized the coverage didn't include her specialist. His phone rings. His ex-wife's attorney. He doesn't answer. Back at Sacred Heart, Tommy Chen delivers a new security tablet to Rachel's office, full administrative access, every restriction removed. Commander Hawthorne stops by to discuss SEAL medical protocols. Sandra Morrison from the VA Liaison Office brings case files, veterans who need advocates, who need someone who understands both the medical system and the weight of service. Rachel's phone rings. Board Chair Gregory Walsh on the line. Can she expand the program to 3 more hospitals in the network? She can. She will. The tremor in her hand steadies as she reaches for the phone. During the orientation for the new Veteran Services staff, a room full of former medics and corpsmen and nurses who understand what it means to work under pressure, Rachel stands at the front with the kind of presence that fills spaces. She delivers her closing statement with the voice of someone who stopped trying to be small. Sometimes the bravest warriors carry stethoscopes, not guns. Master Sergeant Carver, sitting in the back row with Miguel beside him, raises his hand in parade ground salute. For the first time in 2 years, Major Rachel Torres salutes back. The sound is small but unmistakable, the sharp snap of a hand striking chest, the ritual of recognition, the acknowledgement that some callings can't stay buried. If you've made it this far, you already know the truth. The people who help us in our darkest moments are often the same people we failed to see when they walked past us in the light. Subscribe for more stories about the ones we almost missed. Like this video if you believe quiet strength matters. And comment, have you ever judged someone only to discover you were dead wrong?